name and your involvement in this project?
My name's Carol Kirk, and I've been involved in looking for co-housing for many years. And when Avril came up with wanting to use her field, it was probably the 5th or 6th place that I'd thought about being involved in. And because the place is already there, it makes it much easier. Always before, it's been a matter of people having to all sell at once or combine things, and people disagreeing about what they want and how they want things. But if you've got a bare field, you've got the start. And then when the Housing Association came on, well, it made the whole thing possible in another way, because the access was there. And anyway, what we found was that the older people were really wanting to offer something out. Young people tend to want some situation that's precious for them, whereas the older people really were at a point where they wanted to make something bigger, offer things to other people more. So social housing was a really good thing for us all to want at that time. So it really made sense.
So for you, there's been a real personal need to find a project like this?
It started even before I was living with my parents, because I separated from my husband, and I just wanted something. I did live in a community when I was in my 20s, and my first daughter was born there, and my first husband, and that was one of the most lovely times of my life. So looking again for something like that, rather than people all being stuck in their own boxes. I don't need to own things in the same way as many people might. So sharing for me is something that I'm quite happy to do.
And how important is it that this community is cross-generation and is all ages?
Well, that was a really big one, because as my parents got older, and they are not people who've gone down the pub or watched the telly, and I'd worked in some old people's homes, the thought of having them in a situation which would be alien to them was awful. So I started looking for a place with them in mind as well, because I didn't just want them on my own. Well, I've had that in the end, because we haven't found anywhere, but Dad died at home and Mum's on the way pretty close now. But it would have been much easier for me, and much better situation if I'd had a community around me at that time to share things. And the other reason was Dad was a bit of a recluse and Mum was social at the time, and so to be able to walk out and see everybody else in the community while he could be reclusive was just the perfect mix. But it never happened. But it would be nice for it to be able to happen for other people.
Fantastic. And what do you think the impact's going to be on the wider community with this project?
Well, actually, I think that once it is up and running, I think that it won't upset anybody else. I think it's all in the imagination that we are a commune that's going to cause problems. So I think it will only enhance, like for the playground for the children, and any other facilities that we have that they be able to use. I don't think it will be what they're imagining at all.
And what was the brief given to the architects? What's been the design principles behind this project?
To leave as much space on the field for community land, for growing, for playing, and just sharing space, to have the community house as well. And people had to come down from the idea of having detached or semi-detached places, to use terraces to make it a better space for everybody to use together. Yeah.
And how important is it the green credentials as a project? And the sustainable nature of the design and some of the technology going in?
Very much for most of us involved, very much. It's quite hard because you haven't got enough builders now and it's seen as something that's an expensive option, and I don't believe it should be. I'd love to be able to prove that it doesn't have to be.
Can you happy to answer that again? I need to hear it's either sustainable or environmental low impact design, so we can hear what we're talking about, but can we say one of the positive things, or one of the things that will bring down the living costs for the future, will be the investment we've put in green technologies?
Yes, it can be.
Sorry, can we, when we're going back through it, can we avoid green technologies and talk about sustainable design? Because what we're trying to do here is avoid add-ons and try and make the buildings as efficient as possible.
Yes.
And actually, that would be a really good thing in terms of pushing the boundaries. This is about how we can do it without spending the additional money, because in order for it to be something that other people can learn from and pick up in the mainstream, which then benefits sort of house building going forwards in Herefordshire, it's only going to be adopted by the mainstream if it's not seen as more expensive. But yes, also talk about the fact that that in itself will save you money in the future in terms of your bills, and again that means that that gives you I'll let you think about how you word that.
Bombarded with too much information.
I think the really important thing is to have houses that are simply built, but with a sustainable.
We might have to clap for the toilet flush, hang on. Please will be a toilet flush, won't it? Yeah. Did you hear that? Yeah, I thought you might. Wait until they leave the toilet. Close the door.
I love the way your brain's trained to pick up all of that.
Well, you heard that, didn't you?
Training him. Training Rafi.
Okay. The sustainability of the project and the design.
The sustainability needs to be right there in the building of the houses from the beginning. Adding on bits and pieces isn't an interest to us at all. We want houses that will make a difference to living costs on an everyday basis. The same way that we are advocating only one car a family at the most, so that we can share any extra trips. Yes, it's vitally important that for the sake of everybody, people begin to use less and need less and enjoy life by sharing things with each other.
So what kind of impact is this project going to have in your life? What's your personal wish from it?
That I won't have to have every bit of kit that I need in life to own it for myself. That I'll be able to share various things with other people in the community. And I'll be very happy to do that. And particularly things like growing and gardening. I find it hard on my own to battle with the weeds, but with a lot of people you can grow a lot and have a lovely place, a beautiful environment to be in too.
And how, so there's a privately owned and then there'll be the social housing or community housing. How important is it that that's fully integrated in one community, that we're talking about a body that's...
I do a lot of pastoral work with families to do with the organisation I work with, and I just know that there's so many people that just need real friendship in as much as a helping hand, people interested in them, and they can be so isolated even on a big estate. To have a different way of living together so that you actually interact in a much more meaningful way will make a lot of difference to people who have been struggling and in society.
And in terms of the local community and the facilities that are already here, and in your mind, will this build a stronger local community, not help with the schools, it will support what's already in place?
I think it will. I think any doubling up will not be a hindrance to one or the other, because there'll be a different ethos which will attract some people and integrate well, I hope. I mean, that's the idea, is not to be exclusive but to be integrative. The schools, there's 2 schools within walking distance, and hopefully they will both benefit. They're both fairly full at the moment, but schools, I know the numbers go up and down quite regularly. It will help keep the shop open, certainly. The shop that used to be at the top in Kingsthorne was closed. I think local shops are really important, that people don't have to whiz off in a car to the supermarkets all the time. And hopefully if we can grow enough, we can have some for sale too, which would be for the local community. Fresh vegetables from the doorstep. Can't be a bad idea.
Fantastic. And what would you say to any councillor wavering on the edge of sort of your last plug of why this needs to happen? Why it should happen here, now, and on this side with these people?
Because I think society's real dis-ease is their growing isolation as technology grows. I think we're actually having to heal communities of people, families, by actually working on how to relate to each other these days. So many families live almost in isolation with televisions in each room, and they've lost the ability. It's obvious when you're teaching children that many of them have lost the ability to relate, and school is a healing ground. Well, this would be a home healing ground in my eyes. It would be a situation where people could learn to really relate to each other again, to be interested for real in each other. Is that enough? Can I stop now?
Yeah.
I'll just get one more little bit on the end of that. So I think you summed it up really well at the end. I think the one thing that we need to add to that is it's a well-known fact that people can stay in their homes longer, and you've touched on it a few times in terms of that support network, and will live longer and healthier and more independent lives if they have a support network.
Oh, for
there.
older people, yeah.
And I think if we can just touch on, if we can kind of specifically relate to that as a known fact, and the fact that then reduces with the cuts to public services and budgets, that there's an opportunity to help to address that crisis, because it is a crisis for the whole country in terms of how do we look after our old people, and how do we keep them independent and healthy for as long as possible, and that social interaction is a huge part of that. And I think if you can try and just sum that up in a couple of lines, that will, because again it's hitting those councillors in terms of what they know that they need to address and don't have an answer for.
Yeah, okay.
That'd be great.
So the real need for people to have meaning in their lives, to have friendships and people around them giving them support, it's not just single mothers, old people.
Sneeze. I just put a bomb behind. Oh, yeah.
She's going to sneeze.
That's what you shouldn't do on camera. Sorry. Oh. You were doing superb until I messed that up for you.
So particularly vulnerable people, single mothers, old people, if they've got a support network around them, it's not just a warden, for instance, for old people, but if it's a real meaningful community, if it's a real meaningful community, I'm sure they'll be able to live in their own places much longer with that support. And individual parents and mothers will find ways of going on in life. Children will get the support they need from other children around, won't be such a demand on their parents.